just winging it here. Roger, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then maybe Dion, would you offer opening remarks? Thank you.
Please rise. Repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity which we have to be as citizens of this great community. Grateful for all the opportunities it grants us and our families. We pray that Thou will be with us tonight, that we may discuss and make the best decisions for the city and its citizens. We pray that Thou will watch over and protect our men and women serving our country, and these things we say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, appreciate that. All right, do we have any changes to tonight's agenda,
No, we don't.
council? If not, I'll entertain a motion on the agenda.
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda as written.
Second.
Motion by Ben, second by Eric, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion is unanimous. Okay, we'll have an open session now. If there's anything that's not for public hearing or comment that's on the agenda, or if you have something that is not on the agenda and you'd like to discuss with the council, please come state your name and address. Thank you.
My name is Donna Jolly, I live on 1380 East, 150 North, the worst road in town. And if you've driven on it, you'd know it was. First of all, I want to thank the ones who clear my road. My road's like this, and I have a panicky attack if I have to go downhill on Nancy Road. So I really appreciate hearing the snowplow go by, or whatever. And I also want to thank the firemen and the policemen. I guess I just got getting emotional. Who serve us. And I thank them for their protection. And I pray for their safety. There are some things I want to express about the economy and the spending in our city. The last drop in the economy scared quite a few people, I think. A lot of people learned they didn't want to get in a lot of debt. And they learned the hard way, some of them. And I grew up in the Depression, so I had grown up with hard times. But it wasn't hard to me. I was on a farm, we had everything we needed. And my grandkids, and I've told you this before, they tease me when I put my plastic spoons and utensils in the dishwasher and reuse them. They think that's funny. I said, well, you haven't had hard times in your life when you do things like that. And that's why I brought some more bread tonight. This is my over 40-year-old wheat. And when I put gluten in it, it raises fine. And they say it's still nourishing to us. But this is symbolism in frugality. I know that Pleasant Grove is already in extreme debt. I don't know how much, but I know we have 2 bonds out that we need to get paid. And some of the things that have gone on with some city council meeting, because I'm very conservative, and I admit that, but I realize a lot of people nowadays, they haven't grown up in hard times, and they don't know. And if we have another economy thing like we did last time, it gets a little scary, and I don't think it's wise to get in a lot of debt. Some of the things, I'm getting ahead of myself on my paper. I'm sure you feel justified in the way you spend, or you wouldn't be spending it that way. And I feel like we all have the same agenda, but we all kind of maybe do it a little bit differently. Because we all want a nice community, and we want to be proud of our community. But there's some people that have come in and asked for money, and I think $7,000 to tell the community that we need to, be careful with our water. Do we really need to spend that money on that? Do we need to be told? I think you tell us all the time in our weekly newspaper or in schools. Why spend money on that? I got thinking about it, and I thought, you know, it makes us feel good when we can give money to people and do things like that. But it makes us feel better when we do it, when we know we can afford it, or we don't do it when we know we can't afford it. If we put our priorities first and say, well, I'm sorry we can't do that, we spent money on that. We have a priority of serving our community and fixing the roads. We need to do that because we've put it off too long. And we need to do it because they've all been dug up because putting in the water system. So we need to concentrate on that. You can tell people that when they come and ask for money. Because I think when you use self-discipline, you're more proud of yourself. And in some ways, I think our community could set a good example. Some communities are doing fine, but some communities are in a lot of debt, even more than we are. And I think would be good to set the example and say, we are going to get out of debt. We are going to pay our way. We're not going to spend money unwisely. There are some things, maybe I don't know the full story, but there is just a few, and I'm gonna try and keep it at 3 minutes.
Please do, thank you.
There are some things that happened in the city council meeting that I questioned about how the money was spent. The first one was when Bruce Tall, it was probably his last meeting or something like that, and they decided they got $80,000 with the budget, so what are they gonna do? They're gonna spend it on the rec building, put in new TVs. I got thinking, there's nothing wrong with those TVs. And they wanted to update everything. They spent $80,000. Well, the rec center's nice. Very nice. I don't know if it maintains itself. I don't know if it's ever gonna be able to pay for its maintenance. But I know they won't do it on my 50 cents when I go in to pay to walk. But I hope that they eventually will be able to pay at least for its maintenance. And I know we have at least maybe 9 or 10 more years to pay on that.
So I think your time is.
Is all right?
Yeah,
All right.
you're done.
I will
Thank you
have
very
time
much.
to say a couple more things.
Probably not. I think
Probably
it'd
not.
be best if we did.
Okay. I would close and say, how much is our debt is our city in, actually? Let's put the roads in priority and work on them gradually, then pay off the bonds before we do anything more, any more bonds or debt. If we can do it, if we choose to do it.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the council?
Lisa Coombs, 1742 East Cherokee Drive. Just a reminder, it's kind of still far ways out, but we're getting ready to start our planning and get it kicked off and ready to go. We're already thinking about the Heritage Jubilee, so just kind of get that in your thought process. Like I said, we're going to start our meetings next month, and we're excited. It's going to be bigger than ever, so keep that in your thoughts, and let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the open session and we'll move on to item number 6. This is for consent items, and it's for council minutes on December 15th and also our 2 vouchers. Any comments or questions?
No.
Okay, if not, I will entertain a motion.
Oops, sorry, Kathy,
I just sent them out today, so I don't know if everyone had time to read them.
I did,
Okay,
Sure.
so with that, I'll make a motion to approve the consent items.
Second?
okay, we have a motion by Eric, second by Sid, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right. Item number 7. We don't have any appointments at this time. We have been interviewing. For those that, yes, Ken?
I guess it didn't get put on the agenda, but we would like to take this item, opportunity to make some recognition of.
Sure.
those that-
You bet.
But if you wanted to finish what you were saying.
For those that are interested in serving in volunteer capacities in the city, we have some openings on our planning commission, our board of adjustment, our beautification commission, probably our downtown advisory board, and our neighborhood chairs. I mean, there are a lot of openings right now. We've been interviewing and people are volunteering, they're stepping up, but we'd like to make sure that everyone has that opportunity. So if you are interested, please get with Kathy and fill out an information sheet, and then we'd be happy to interview.
Mayor, is this possible to get a slider on the homepage of the website that says volunteer opportunities with all these listed in one place?
Yeah, I think David was actually working today with Trent on our volunteer website to customize it to a point where people can click on that and see, here's all the openings that we have in the city, and then they can fill out an online application that will go directly to Kathy.
Okay.
So we can do the slider. This is kind of the thing that will eventually get us to a point where whenever we have an opening, we can put it on social media and link it to that, and then they could just go on and apply right online.
So yeah, can we do the slider so it's easy to find on the website and it links into that?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
when are we expecting that will be
I,
up and running?
how close are we?
Yeah, so I met with Trent today, and we're probably less than a week away before we have that website.
Populated and ready to go.
Okay.
That's a good catch, thank you. Okay, Ken?
Okay, council and members of the community present, as we like to do when our public servants finish their time of service, we like to recognize the good service that they have given. And the 3 that are here tonight have given a good amount of time towards the service, and this is not a paid service by any means, other than perhaps a little bit of food here and there that we throw at them, but for the amount of hours that they have served, we do appreciate, and it is very valuable to the city and the community for what they've done. So in the Board of Adjustment, we have had 2 outgoing members, one of which was our chairman during this last year, and we'll start with him. That's Frank Johnson, if he can come forward. Frank, we'd like to give you this plaque that says, in recognition of outstanding and dedicated service to the Pleasant Grove City Board of Adjustment, April 2006 through January of 2016. So thank you. What's interesting is that even after so much time, a lot of these will beg to stay on. They like it so much. So and Frank certainly was one of those.
Frank, we do have other openings now in the city. Beautification. We'll get you somewhere else.
Next we have Sterling Wadley, who served about the same amount of time. So Sterling, we appreciate your service, and the plaque says the same thing. I'll read it again. In recognition of outstanding and dedicated service to the Pleasant Grove City Board of Adjustment, March 2007 through January 2016.
Thank you.
And then we have Dallin Nelson, who has served 2 consecutive terms with the Planning Commission, and he recently finished those terms, and 8 years, so August 2007 through January 26. Again, in recognition of outstanding and dedicated service to the Pleasant Grove City Planning Commission.
Thank you for your service. It's, you guys have served a long time. We appreciate it. Okay, let's go on now. We have item number 8, which is a presentation from the Utah County Health Department on e-cigarettes. And we have Justice Albertson and Christian Nilsson from the Outrage Program, and then Lena Flesher from Utah County. Did I get that right?
Sort of.
Sort of? You want to correct it?
It's Linnea Fletcher. So I'm the Tobacco Prevention and Control Program Manager for the Utah County Health Department. And with me I have 2 of our youth who are here to present to you about what we are doing with all of the cities in our community here in Utah County.
Don't both go at once.
We're going to. Hi, my name is Justice Albertson.
And I'm Christian Nielsen.
We are youth leaders from Outrage, a youth group against tobacco. We are here to ask Pleasant Grove to update their park policy to include electronic cigarettes. Some of the reasons why we feel the policy should be updated is first, the confusing message. It's confusing because if you have an area where you can vape but you can't smoke, then people are just going to want to do both. From surveys taken by the Utah County Health Department at the county fair, McCord's Corn Maze, and other public events, it was discovered that 15.2% of all youth that took our surveys used electronic cigarettes at parks or other outdoor recreational areas. We collected 2,563 surveys in total. The percentage of use at a park among adults was even greater at 29%. From the PNA data, which is the Prevention's Needs Assessment, youth use rates of electronic cigarettes have almost doubled in the state of Utah. In Utah County, youth use rates rose from 1.7 in 2013 to 7.6 in 2015. The number of youth who have experimented with electronic cigarettes in the state was 12% in 2013, and in 2015 it had risen to 22.9%. In Utah County, youth experimentation rose from 4.3 in 2013 to 15.9% in 2015. It is alarming how many youth are trying out electronic cigarettes, with the number more than tripling in the last 2 years.
Nicotine has been proven to affect the brain in teens before the brain in adults, and also has been shown to be a gateway drug. The non-regulation of e-juice allows users to vape substances such as forms of marijuana, alcohol, cocaine, and other harmful substances in public areas where there are not electronic cigarette policies. People exposed to e-cigarette aerosol absorb nicotine at levels comparable to people exposed to secondhand smoke by conventional cigarettes.
We have seen the use of electronic cigarettes in our local parks around strangers and children. We feel that children should have a safer environment at parks and other recreational areas. You have the choice, that the children do not, to take the initiative to make parks a safer environment for everyone.
Okay, thank you for your time, and the Utah County Health Department will provide all the signage for the parks, and this is an example of what the signage look
I have a question for you, or if you want to answer.
like. Okay.
So is it, the reason you want the parks is it harmful to someone who's around that, or is it just the appearance that you don't want like the other kids to see that the youth are doing this, or adults?
It's harmful to us too, like secondhand smoke with a cigarette. You walk past that, you're inhaling that, and that is getting in your lungs and it's still affecting you. And it's the same with electronic cigarettes.
Oh, is that? Okay.
You can get secondhand nicotine from it.
Yep.
Okay, I know.
I don't know about you, I don't want that in my lungs. So.
What does outrage stand for?
We're outraged that big tobacco is targeting us as youth for their experiments and to be their new customers or whatever.
I'd like to add, if I may, Mayor, my personal appreciation. I was able to go to an opinion leader dinner with Sarah Simmons, Simons, and other representatives from Outrage and the Utah Health Department. It was a fantastic opportunity, really impressive what the youth in our community are doing to be involved and to advocate for change and to address policy concerns. So we appreciate your time coming today. It's really awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is that signed for us? Are you leaving it behind, or do you take a sample?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you give it to Dion Giles right
Yeah.
here? And then Tina, do we have sample language for modifying our park policy? Okay. Would you go ahead and take care of that for us? Thank you. Thank you for coming and appreciate your presentation.
It's like a good cause to be involved with, thank you.
Okay, we have nothing under item 9. Item 10 are action items ready for vote. 10A is to consider for adoption a resolution 2016-03 authorizing the mayor to enter into a professional service agreement with Think Architecture for architecture services regarding the public safety building. Scott?
Last week, if you recall, we had some members of our Public Safety Committee come in and give a recap as to what they've been working on. Their next step is to engage architectural services to review some of the current numbers we have and also look at a couple options that we haven't fully vetted as far as the price is concerned regarding the public safety building. In order to do that, we needed to engage an architect to come in and do that. The Public Safety Committee went through an RFP process. There were 6 proposals. They interviewed 3 of the candidates, and by unanimous vote of that group, recommended hiring Think Architecture to provide these services. The Public Safety Building Committee doesn't have the authorization to spend funds, and so the City Council does need to authorize that. They pointed out last week that Think has extensive experience in doing these types of projects, and they were the lowest bid number at $7,500 to engage in the services. So this is the agreement. It's a standard agreement. In the agreement, it states this is the work product they're going to do. It talks about the things that they're going to study, the price is $7,500, and then they give us a timeline. Which they're saying is 9 weeks, but can be faster depending on how quickly we turn things around on our end.
Okay, any questions for Scott? Okay. All right, any further discussion?
I'd like to raise a couple of thoughts. I think this is a great solution. I'm grateful for unanimous decision coming out of the Public Safety Building Committee. It seems like in some ways a no-brainer when it's the least expensive option and a good solution. One recommendation I would have for us to consider going forward, when items like this show up on the agenda where it says, for example, professional services agreement for architectural services regarding the public safety building, I've heard from members of the community that they have over the last few years been concerned that there's an agenda or an idea that there's going to be a public safety building versus possibly multiple buildings. And I think just in general, to the extent that we can be sensitive to that fear amongst the community and put it maybe a parenthetical S or whatever to make sure that that's clear to people.
Sure.
We can do that, and the proposal states that we're looking at separate buildings as one of the options and combined as one of the options. So.
Yeah, I think the proposal's great, very clear on 6, really 7 in some ways, different possible options that we're exploring. So I think it's great. That's just a thought that I had, just something I've heard people concerned about. But generally, I'm very favorably disposed to this idea. I mean, sensitive to also Mrs. Jolly's comment, in some ways this is more money being spent on consultants, but I think it's justified to get the kind of vetting that the public wants. My hope would be that we get 70–80% consensus behind ideas. I think the way we're going to heal and unite the city is coming up with solutions that bring super majorities together all on the same page.
Okay, any other discussion?
No.
Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we adopt resolution 2016-03 authorizing you to enter into a professional services agreement with Think Architecture for architectural services regarding public safety building or buildings.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ben and a second by Eric. By voice, Diana.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Sid.
Yes.
Ben.
Yes.
Lynn.
Yes.
Voting is unanimous. Thank you.
Hey Scott, you sent an email earlier today that this was in the Dropbox, I don't see it in there.
It's,
The Think agreement.
It's not in the packet.
it's not in the packet, it's in the Dropbox when you click on City Council packets.
all you can see is Think Architect and then the date.
Okay.
Sometimes that happens where it doesn't show up, but,
Okay, I'll just get with you after. I just wanna make
Okay.
sure I have it. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so the next step is the anticipating approval, the Public Safety Building Committee, along with Think Architecture, will be meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock to begin the whole discussion process, kind of move it forward from there, and the public is invited to attend. Thank you to the PSB committee for all the hard work.
Where do they meet?
Right here in this room. Anyone's welcome to attend, including if there's a majority of the council, that's fine, as long as we're not discussing and making decisions. But it is a notice.
It's noticed as an open meeting, so whole council can show up, that's not a problem.
Okay, our next item is 10B, to consider for adoption a resolution 2016-04, approving the form of the equipment lease and purchase agreement with J.P. Morgan Chase Bank, N.A., and authorizing the mayor to sign said lease purchase agreement and authorizing the execution and delivery thereof, providing for an effective date. Denise?
Yeah, Denise isn't here today, so
Okay.
I'm gonna go over this. This is something we talked about last year when we put our budget together, a need for a new vehicle out at Public Works to do some of our maintenance, mainly snow plowing roads and just having a large truck. Now, we have a few other large trucks that take care of these services for us. Our issue is becoming that these trucks are getting old, and so we thought it would be a good idea to start replacing these on a, not on a necessarily a regular basis. I mean, we don't necessarily have a plan to do this again next year, but we are working hard to try to get our fleet a little more up to date. We've done good with the police vehicles. We've have been working on Public Works lately to try to make sure we don't get to a point where we're spending more on maintenance than we are just in general on our vehicles. So that was the purpose of this, was to purchase this vehicle. It is through a lease to own, so when we're done with the lease payments, then we will own the vehicle and then hopefully get many more years out of it at that point. But in order for us to engage in this, we need authorization of the city council to enter into the lease.
What's the additional expense incurred by doing it as a lease rather than as a capital
So
purchase?
there, let me see. The principal portion of it is $205,105. That's the cost of the vehicle. The interest rate is just over 2%, 2.15%. Our interest over the 14 years will be $16,580.
This is a really favorable lease.
We feel at 2%,
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
Okay.
For us to save enough money to spend $200,000 on a vehicle would take us a few years to do that. And this is, we do this from time to time with large ticket items like this, is what we, in order to get the budget funds, because it's a yearly payment of $15,834. We can absorb that into the budget and take care of that. We cannot absorb the $205,000 needed to buy it outright.
Will there be a piece of equipment retired as a result of this?
Marty, do you want to answer that?
Currently, I was actually interested in kind of understanding where our equipment was right now. So we have 8 pieces of equipment. We have a 94, just kind of looking through some of them. We have a 94, we have a 95, we have a 399s, we have a 2003 and a 2012. So you can see that our fleet is fairly old. And so as we go through, we'll bring on this new piece of equipment. Some of that older equipment over time will be retired as it no longer becomes useful. It also should be noted that this equipment is fitted for a plow, so some of the cost of that, it does have a salt spreader that comes with it. It does have a plow on the front of it as well, and all the attachments, as well as an ability to pull trailers and things of that nature, which is useful for us, that we need. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, so I guess my question is, this is not necessarily to replace something immediately. It's to put into service and then eventually you're gonna
Yeah,
retire
and John could
something.
probably answer if there's anything directly right now that we're planning on just getting rid of, but this is, he's in the audience today.
I can answer that. We are not going to retire anything at this time. Maybe when we purchase another one in a few years or whatever, the next one is, you know, we have the money to do that, that's when we'll probably retire.
With the savings, I mean, it's great. It's just a really expensive truck.
It is.
You know, that's,
Well,
we're
like,
nearing
like Marty
affordability.
pointed out, a lot of that is the additional add-ons in order to provide the services that we need with it.
Can you speak, Scott, to the
Yeah.
competitive investigate, whatever research we do to find the best price? Do we shop around? What is the process that Public Works follows when we're buying a new piece of equipment?
John, do you want to, come on up, John.
So, we, of course, went to the state bid to see what was available, the price on the state bid for a similar truck. Not, this is a Peterbilt truck that we're getting. The one on the state bid was not a Peterbilt, it was a Mack truck, and it was actually more than the price of this truck. So we chose not to go with the more expensive truck, which meant we had to get 3 bids. Does that make sense? So if we go with state bid, we don't have to get 3 bids. So we didn't. We got 3 bids. The Peterbilt price was cheaper than the Mack. And the
International?
International. And so we went with the Peterbilt. And we think it's a better truck. And we think that when we're ready to sell it, it'll still have some value. You know, maybe even $50,000 value.
Thanks, Tom.
Any other questions?
I have a question. I wish Denise were here to answer, but I've had people ask me recently questions about costs of lawn mowing machines in the city and various expensive pieces of equipment. I'm wondering how thoroughly our budget breaks out those kinds of expenses for the lay consumer to study. Do you have any thoughts on whether we can enhance that, where we're at with what the current ability of the average citizen is to look at our budgets and figure out how much we're spending on equipment like that?
He's talking to the opengov.com.
Well,
Right?
Well, I mean, that's the direction I'd like to go. We've talked about before, different open government transparency tools, but I'm just asking generally, what's our budget situation like in your view in terms of helping the public assess the cost of specific pieces of equipment?
yeah, I mean, when we publish the budget, we publish it in line item form. And so if we are buying a new piece of equipment and it's in a line item, for instance, we might have a line item in parks for $80,000 for equipment. And a new mower might be $40,000 of that. So if the general public's looking at the budget, they're not gonna see what that money has specifically been spent on. So that there's not a way for them to click on that or whatever and say, okay, they spent $40,000 on this, $10,000 on this, $10,000 on this, or whatever. Usually if they have that sort of questions or interests, then they can just call our finance director and they can pull up the line item on their computer and it lists it all out. Now on the state transparency website, transparency.gov, I think we're required to give every transaction that we make to them. And so people can go through and they can see every bill that we're paid essentially on that website.
Like the paid vouchers that we get.
Uh-huh,
That's public
something like
information.
that.
We're gonna send links to people if they have questions.
Yeah, so the public's not gonna necessarily know when we buy it, so if we buy it and if they're looking every week, they'll see it, or it might be monthly when we update that, I don't remember. So if they're really looking for something, they could probably find it on there, might take them some time. It'd be easier just to call Denise and say, can you tell me what's being spent here? And then that's the easier way to do it. The transparency.gov, there's numbers, there's information, and I think some people can make heads and tails of it, some people can't. That's why it's always good to call staff, because we can actually explain kind of what's happening there. And I don't know, maybe in the future it gets to a point where it's a little better, so more searchable. I don't think we're there quite yet, at least as far as individual transactions.
And something to add to that is that I think all of the directors, if you just go in and ask them, what is your process of purchasing large equipment, you'll find that they go through, they only have so much money, and so they want the best equipment, something that's gonna last for a long time. They're very frugal. And so I think if any citizen wants to go in and just, for each department, so go talk to Dion, go talk to John, find out what the process is. What is your process of finding the best quality for the cheapest amount of money? I think they'd be very satisfied with the process.
Agreed.
Yes.
So I think we got an email earlier from a citizen that talked about opengov.com. And I've looked into that before, and I think the state is doing a wonderful job in moving towards that and making it more transparent and easily researchable, I guess, for the typical citizen to drill down and look. OpenGov does cost anywhere from $3,000 to $30,000, depending on what you want and where you want to go. So cities really have to look at that and determine if that's really the approach you want to take on something like that. So, and because we have something available already at the state level, they are working on to solve that. So.
Yeah, and I'm not, the transparency website's been a couple of years. I was actually looking for something else another city did, and it's a great resource to just pull that up and look at that. But I don't remember how searchable it was.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could go to Pleasant Grove City, type in mower, and see if it would do a search and find that transaction. I don't know if it's that good or if it's
not the ones I'm familiar with. I've been advocating the city for some time a solution that's free, that's done through BYU's Open Software Lab. That would be a really valuable tool in my mind. But yeah, that's a great answer, and I want to echo what Diana said for the public's benefit, that we are blessed by very accessible staff who are willing to answer a lot of questions and are quick to be very responsive if you've got a specific question on the cost of some specific item.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, any other discussion? Any specific to the resolution that's in front of us?
No, but I'd like to make a motion that we consider adoption, resolution 2016-04, approving the form of the equipment lease and purchase agreement with JP Morgan Chase Bank, and authorizing Mayor Daniels to sign said lease purchase agreement, and authorizing the execution and delivery thereof, and providing for an effective date.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Diana and a second by Lynn. By voice, Ben.
Yes.
Sid.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Diana.
Yes.
Lynn.
Yes.
Okay, voting is unanimous. Thank you. All right, this next section is items for discussion. 11A is a discussion on the road fee study, and Lewis Young is here.
Yeah,
right?
well, it's actually Fred Philpott, but he is representing Lewis Young.
Lewis Young and Fred.
Are you working with Lewis Young? Yes.
Yeah,
Excellent.
he's been with them for a few years, and he's done some other studies for us, and we need to get Fred, you have a PowerPoint, right?
Yeah.
And, could you
Might have to turn that on,
set up?
get it warmed up.
Well, Fred's getting set up, well, there's a couple of things. Number one, we are streaming today.
Hi.
So there's our camera.
Cool.
Now, we have not publicly advertised our streaming yet. We were doing our test run today. We want to see how it goes. We want to make sure the sound is good. That's usually been the issue, is making sure that the sound works. And part of it is a responsibility on our end to actually talk into our microphones so that it can be amplified through the speakers, which does make it helpful. Now, when we were testing it earlier today, there was a meeting on here going on in this room. There was no microphones being used. And if I turned the sound all the way up on my computer, turned it all the way up on YouTube, I could hear what they were saying. I could hear the conversation. It wasn't super loud, but I could understand what they were saying. So we're hoping with by using our microphones, that it will be in a state that will be quite easy for people to listen to. So that's, like I said, we'll watch it tomorrow and see how it went, if the quality is where we want it. Now this is a wide angle camera, so it shows the council, all of you. It shows this wall, it shows that wall, shows all the staff. And so when you actually enlarge it to fit your full screen, it's not, you know, you can tell who's talking and things like that, but it's not HD, I mean, it's an HD quality camera, but depending on how you're looking, it's not super clear
It's
on.
affordable.
It is affordable, thank you, Mayor, for,
Scott,
yeah.
so is that gonna be streamed on plgrow.org?
Yeah, so we have a YouTube channel, and what we're working on is making sure that it can be accessed via the website. So you can go to our website, you can find the stream and click it from there, or you can go on YouTube and search the Pleasant Grove City channel. Those are the bugs that we will have figured out here in the next few days, and then we will start promoting the streaming service to our residents so that they know that that's.
So now it's wide angle, so the camera already adds 10 pounds.
I know, yeah, we better hit the gym. Better hit the gym.
And Kathy and I are on the end. It's bad.
Well, I was just telling Eric that I think in some ways it's good that it's not really high resolution because
We also have our new clock, which we were, again, working through a couple bugs as we are going to be using that in the future, so we want to make sure it's big enough for the people up here could see, and that's going to be the new timekeeper. Kathy will be the one that will be running that.
Because she has so many free hands.
Yes, as we could tell the first go around, you know. On our road fee, we have talked about this, well, for over a year. I know last year when we were in our retreat, the feedback from the city council is we wanted to have a road fee study done so that we can have something to consider. Now, whether we adopt it or not is going to be future discussion, but this gives us some information so the council can have a reference point as to some of the possibilities to increase our road funding.
Scott, I just want to preface as well,
Yeah.
this is just an analysis, we're not,
We're not adopting anything tonight.
I've already seen some numbers out there on social media about what it's gonna be per month, I don't know how anyone would have that information. So this is not what we're going to be charging at this, we're not making that decision.
Yes, that's
And this isn't set in stone, this is just an analysis done to see what options we have for
Yeah.
use like future road funding.
So what we want to show you tonight is the method, a little bit of the methodology. Again, we follow, the Provo has had this implemented since March of this year. Now they did their studies 2 years leading up to actually implementation. So as they've done that, a lot of cities on our city manager network, there's a couple other cities that have implemented fees. Not necessarily using the Provo model. I think some of them just said, we're gonna charge an extra $2 and we're off and running. We wanted to actually have an analysis done so that if somebody wanted to challenge this, we have the background to say, here's the reasons why. We want to be able to tell the reasons why and what the methodology means. It's just not as simple as picking a number out of thin air and saying, this is what we're going to charge people. As we were working on this study, my direction to them was, as the numbers you're going to see are based on us generating an extra $1 million of revenue. So when you see the numbers pop up, if those numbers look quite large, then if we cut them in half, we'll generate $500,000 of revenue. If we double them, we'll generate $2 million in revenue. So this is really a baseline for the city council. It's not a baseline, it's context for you as we start making decisions on whether we're going to implement a fee, and then if we are going to implement a fee, how much that fee is going to be. So for tonight, the PowerPoint isn't super long, it's 5 or 6 slides, and Fred's going to go over that. And then what we're seeking is a little bit of feedback. If there's some more information that you want or some clarifying questions, Fred and I can answer those. And then I think when we do our retreat at the first part of February, we'll go a little deeper. So this is really just the introduction to the city council, so you can see where the numbers are at right now today.
Oh, you have to go all the way around. Sorry.
I'll save some audience members by trying to jump over, rather walk around. Yeah, as Scott has mentioned, we were tasked with looking at how to evaluate a potential fee for a road utility similar to a culinary water. This is just looking at a fee assessment with regards to transportation. So what we looked at is really trying to establish an equitable, sustainable, and transparent way to maintain existing roadways. Understanding that the current funding mechanisms with regards to transportation involve Class C road funds and the general fund. So this would be a new funding mechanism that would allow for the maintenance of existing roadways while trying to meet these objectives of equity, sustainability, and transparency. So in order to do that, we looked at really what is the demand on existing roadways, and that's trip counts. And with regards to impact fees and roadway fee studies, there's an industry standard with regards to assessing trips, and that's using the ITE manual. It evaluates trips by property type or land use type. So we utilized the city's, the county actually, the parcel database for the county, as well as the city's business license database, to get at what types of land uses exist within the city and how could we break out those land uses with regards to the demand that's generated from that land use type. So we looked at residential, non-residential, and public uses. And then we broke residential out into single family versus multi-unit land uses, residential types. And then looking at non-residential, we looked at the types of property, applied that demand unit or the trip counts, looking at peak day adjusted trips, and then we broke it out by volume really of land uses that generate less than 2 trips, land uses that generate 2 to 4 peak day trips. And this is looking at a peak hour, really saying what is the maximum trips that are generated within a peak hour from this land use type. And you can see the other categories there, looking at 4 to 20 and then greater than 20 peak day adjusted trips. And then for this analysis, we kept all public use together, and that includes schools and churches, looking at those property types. Using the parcel database, we looked at total square feet from those non-residential types. For residential, it's kept on a per unit basis. Then we also compared that to address counts with the business license database. So for simplicity, the total square feet and the trip counts are used to allocate a portion, that amount that we're looking at, that $1 million target. But for simplicity, we wanted to keep it at a bill per address rather than trying to calculate every bill differently. So within the class, for example, here we're saying there's 339 addresses within this class, and we're going to divide the cost over those 339 addresses to determine what the average bill per address would be for each of these classes, which is shown on this slide here. So based on the trip counts, we allocate what percentage of that target amount, that $1 million. So for single family dwelling, based on the trip counts, the peak day adjusted trips, the total number of units, 46% of that target of 1 million would be allocated to single family residential, or $460,770. Looking at that on a per address annually would be $68, and then a per month fee, a rounded per month fee, would be $5.60. We did that for each of the categories here. Multi-units would receive 14% of that allocation, or a monthly fee of $350. And then you can see the non-residential types here ranging from $20.30 all the way up to almost $500 per month for those businesses that generate more than 20 trips in a peak hour. You can see there's not a lot proportionally here. At this higher category, it's only 5% of the total. But when you look at that on a per address basis, it generates that $492. Then for public use, they receive 9% of the total. for an annual allocation of $91,000 and some change to get a monthly fee of $177.10. So what that looks like for the different land use types, for single family and apartments, that's pretty self-explanatory there, the 560 and 350. Other categories, general office would fit in that less than 2 trips at $20.30 a month. Small retail would be in the higher category at $60.20, as well as a medical or dental office. They typically generate a few more trips than general office. Church or school here in this category. Your fast food restaurants or large retail pads generate quite a bit more trips than general office, and so they fall under this larger category of the 187. And then a convenience store is what's driving that component there, and that's typically what we see in impact fees as well as business license fee studies with regards to calls for services. There's a little bit more demand that's generated from convenience stores, which pushes that fee up as a result.
This is national data?
Yeah, so the ITE manual looking at getting the trip counts is national survey data. So the best thing is if we have an actual survey of the community, but usually that comes at...
That'd be expensive.
Yes, yeah, it comes at a cost, and it's challenging to get that sort of data. So we rely on the ITE manual to help us apportion the cost there. Again, as Scott mentioned, the target we set at that 1 million, and it's now how do we divide that up amongst the land use types within the community, and the ITE manual helps us do that.
Another method that we talked about is if we wanted to back into a number, we could do that and just set the rates and then say, okay, how much money does that generate for us? So we have that option as well if that's somewhere the council wants to go.
So just for discussion, it was $1 million.
Yeah, that was the number I gave to them to say, just with this understanding, we need $3.8 million per year to get on top of our roads according to the study that was done last year. So right now we're generating 1.3 million or so in Class C monies and our general fund contribution. So I just went with $1 million.
Okay.
So another piece of information that's not, I didn't put in this slide here, but if we wanted to, back here where I have these broken out, if we averaged all of these costs, it would be more in the $50 to $60 if we just had a single non-residential property type class rather than broken out by these different trip demands. If it was averaged just across all commercial businesses, it would be in that range, in the mid-range here, the $60 across the board. But this allows for that distribution based on demand for the different commercial types there. That summarizes what we've worked on, and if there are any questions, I can address those.
I have a question. Can you go back to the parcel database for a minute and just explain that, how the calculation, how you came up with that?
Yeah, so we, the single-family dwellings and multifamily dwellings were provided by the city's planning department with regards to unit counts. Then the county keeps records with regards to assessed value, taxable values, property information that goes into property tax determination and determinations with regards to assessed values. And so they keep all of that data. That's not perfect.
Is it current data?
Yes, yeah, so we requested that improvement data that they do have. I would caveat this a little bit with the fact that, as you move forward and this becomes if it becomes an implemented strategy, then that database, as the city collects that and manages that database, it would have to be updated with more local data that reflects the realities of the community, and we wouldn't necessarily rely on the county's assessor database moving forward. But right now, that's all we have with regards to property information. square footage data. But moving forward, if this were implemented, then the city could start collecting that information and update it each year potentially to reflect the realities of any changes in that land use.
And is there a way that we can get a copy of this?
Yes, yeah. You mean of the parcel data or just the?
Just this?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Fred, if you just email that to me, I'll put it in the Dropbox.
You know, the next one, I guess a multi-unit, how do you break it out? How do you know who travels more, single family or multi-unit? I mean, how?
Yeah, so that's where this ITE manual surveys properties, and basically what they're doing is throwing a counter down in front of a driveway or a commercial address and counting the times a vehicle crosses that line. So that's really what would happen if a local study were done as well. So I don't know if you've seen those counting strips on roadways. That type of analysis could be done where you would evaluate those ratios within Pleasant Grove City specifically, and look at, okay, how many trips are coming out of apartments versus residential homes, and basically do a survey of properties and come up with that ratio. But
Where would a movie theater fit into that? I'm just asking.
A sub-run movie theater.
So I would think small retail, but it has the IT manual. So the benefit of this is the city will be able to go through that IT manual and say, okay, what if it's a new business that we haven't seen in the community? What sort of trip counts do they have relative to this ratio here? Are they less than 2 trips, 2 to 4, 4 to 20 peak day trips? And let's classify them in there, and we can assess them.
IT or ITE?
ITE.
And what does that stand for?
International Traffic Engineers.
Institute
Institute. Oh yeah.
Wait.
Institute of Transportation Engineers. Yeah.
International Transportation.
No, sorry. Institute
Oh, Institute.
of Transportation Engineers. Yeah.
So the annual allocation, I imagine that column would add up to $1 million.
Yes. Whoops. So yeah, this column here, the annual allocation generates that million, but when I rounded that fee a little bit and said, we're not gonna generate, for simplicity purposes, we're not gonna have a fee that's $5.63,
So this column is $1 million,
yes.
and this is the percentage of the million?
Yeah, so this generates, the 46% generates the
So this is
460,070.
100% roughly. I think it's off by 1%.
Yeah.
It's 100%. And then from there, it's straight math to get to here, and then you round
Correct.
to come to this.
Yeah, so put it in, not getting it out to the penny is the idea. But we could do that, if the intent is to.
Has this approach been used by other cities in the state of Utah or in other cities outside the state?
Yeah, so as Scott mentioned, Provo, this is how they looked at that, of analyzing trip demand by property type within the community, and then assessing the total really that they wanted to generate based on that proportionality of demand, and then assessing the fee on a per address basis rather than, another way to look at it is really you could calculate a separate fee for each development based on their actual square footage, and so every commercial property would have potentially a different bill. So that's the simplicity portion here of saying.
That's as close to uses you could get. Right?
Yes, so we'd say rather than trying to calculate a separate bill for every user, we'll average that per address and say every commercial property within this class is going to pay this fee per address.
And so this methodology is generally accepted?
Well, I don't know if it's generally accepted because this is a new concept of assessing a fee like a utility fee for transportation. So communities are exploring this option. Provo utilized this approach. As Scott mentioned, others have utilized just a straight let's assess another $2 on top of their utility bill and charge it that way. But in my mind, this reflects that equity issue, which is let's try to measure some demand and allocate the fee based on impact on the roadways to the best of our ability. This is the way impact fees are looked at as well, looking at trip counts. So in my mind, that does solve that equity and fairness issue, but time will tell if this becomes more common across communities, because there is a transportation dilemma across communities of how do we maintain our roadways.
So then you mentioned in this area here, the non-residential, another way to do this would just be to average it out.
Correct.
And you'd come out at about $60.
Yeah, so if you just, rather than saying we're gonna have separate classes, we can just have one non-residential. So it'd be residential, non-residential, and public use.
We probably didn't do that, right? They went with this model, right?
Yeah, they break it out in classes here and have several categories of classes and based on demand.
So I have a quick question, right? So we have our high density out there. Let's take building A. It has probably, I don't know how many units are within the area.
Say 12.
12?
12.
Let's say 12. That one, the whole unit, that whole building would just be $350 for that building?
No, and a multifamily, it's per unit.
Per
So
unit, yeah.
it's per unit. So a single family dwelling is considered one address. For a multifamily dwelling, it's per unit in there.
I think if you go back a slide, Fred, there's, if we were just to go one non-residential rate at $60, you have 339 addresses of people that, according to what we're looking at, would be paying $20 a month. And so some of them might look at that and say, now wait a second, why are we shouldering the burden for those that are more than $20 a month? It should be, or more than 20 peak day adjusted trips. And then we get businesses saying, this isn't fair to me. And so, because we actually had this discussion, should we just have one rate for business that makes it simple on our end, collection wise, or should we break it out a little bit? Because as Fred mentioned, technically we could have 1,000 categories and we could go to each individual business and say, here's your trip count, here's your rate. So this breaks it down, which makes it simpler for billing on our end, but also a little bit more fair as far as the different types of uses and who's generating the most traffic.
But we still could look at that flat rate if we wanted.
Absolutely, yep.
So I have a question, so do we bill utility to like the Macy's development? Do we have one bill there or do we collect by door of each?
Each individual business will have a bill.
So is this, the next slide please, is the 492, is that per that whole development of Macy's or is that per door?
Well, so, no, that would be just for Macy's.
Just,
If they meet the more than 20, if they're one of those large traffic.
so we're door to door, we're not development?
No,
Okay.
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, Macy's would have their pay, and Express would have a different one, So Delicious would have a different one,
Okay.
Papa Murphy's would have a different one.
Talk to me briefly about the public use. Conversations with Mayor Curtis and other research I've done into what Provo's doing, they negotiated with public use because of tax exempt status and other issues. There are other hurdles with public use beyond just assessing a fee based on trips like anybody else. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. They right now, with regards to property tax, fall under the exempt category and are exempt from that allocation. And so this would be an assessment to them similar to, the water bill that they would pay and other utilities. So the idea is, trying to say what is the demand generated from the land uses within our community and apportion the cost to the demand within the community. So with regards to the negotiations with specific businesses, we typically, or land use types, we stay out of that and say, here's how we look at it and how it could be allocated. But I do know that there was some discussion with the public uses to say, okay, what can we agree to make sure that, there's some payment there by
well,
yourself.
but Provo had a different conversation because they have a major university
Yeah.
and they have a major hospital.
Yeah.
So most of his public,
Well, both of those were tax exempt.
right.
And so when
had
they,
to come up with something.
when Provo talked about this with their residents, they said, look, we can do a property tax and generate the same amount of revenue, but realize BYU and the hospital are not gonna be paying anything into this.
Right.
So if we're gonna do this and create the fee, then that's a little more equitable across the board as far as the people who are putting demands on the roads and creating the road maintenance issue. And so that was one of the discussions Provo had. And when they kicked out their initial numbers, I think BYU and, LDS Church, I mean, they have the MTC and other things there, they looked at that and said, well, that's kind of a high number. And so they had an actual negotiated deal where they said, we're going to exempt them out of the fee and we're going to negotiate a rate specific just to them. And that's what they did with those two.
But these are just giving us targets of what we ought to try to generate out of public uses to meet an allocation that's fair and equitable.
Correct. Yeah, I'd say, approximately 10% could be assessed to those public uses and generate some additional revenue, as Scott indicated, rather than pushing that all up into taxable properties based on the property tax levy.
Okay, any other questions for Fred?
So what,
We're not, no, it's not a public. Thank you.
So what we'll do, Mayor, is we'll make this available. So if we'll put it on our website, so if public wants to comment on it and send emails to staff or to council if they have some questions that we can answer. But we'll have this on our agenda for our retreat on February 5th and 6th. And then we'll start going deeper as to whether we want to implement or if we want to tweak some of this. So that'd be our next course of action.
One comment to that point, if we could go back to this slide one more time, I think it's important that the whole entire report reflect this idea that this is a target of $1 million.
Yeah, let's, can you make a note on the PowerPoint there? Maybe where it breaks it down monthly, just say based on $1 million in revenue, and then we can put a little disclaimer in there that, that's a good point. Because once these numbers are out there and they start floating, we have to understand this was just a context thing. So we had,
This is a starting point.
it was concrete numbers for us to say, okay, do we go more or less, or do we even implement that? That's what we're heading.
Some plots to start from, so I think it's.
I'll add that definitely.
Yeah, it's a great number in the sense that it makes the math easy. If you
Yeah.
want 2 million, you double it.
Yeah.
If you want 3 million, you triple it. That's good.
That was part of the purpose, yep.
Makes sense, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, our next item, 11B, is a discussion on design guidelines for zoning districts in the Grove area.
A couple weeks ago, we had an email from the mayor that was, I think he had some feedback from a particular developer and started this discussion of what our philosophy was as a city regarding economic development. So that got me thinking as to the different things that we would need to break down and start having discussions on that affect our ability to create business and economic development in our community. So what I'm going to just kind of go over some talking points, and I think we'll have a little bit of a discussion. Again, kind of like the road fee, this is just the primer to get us started, to get us thinking about potential directions we might want to head. But I don't know if we need to figure everything out tonight, and we have it listed as a discussion item. So, seeking feedback, seeking maybe some ideas, but not necessarily taking large courses of action on what to do. So what this, when I look at economic development, one of the things that we run into and that we've run into a little bit recently is our design standards and our design districts. And so to give you a little history, I think it was 2007, I think as Ken and I were talking through this, the city council looked out at the Grove area and said, this area is going to be developed here sometime soon. And I'm assuming this kind of coincided as the hotel was being courted, and I think Mary, you were here, you might remember a little bit more of the timing. And so the planning staff, city council sat down and talked about the vision of the Grove. What's our vision? What do we want it to look like? Because as development starts coming in, we can dictate certain things to ensure quality development out in the Grove. And so they created a vision, and that vision was what we have now, our design standards and our design districts. So different parts of the Grove had different districts, and within those districts there was different design standards. The districts were just kind of a look and a feel. Okay, this is what this area is going to look like, this is what this area is going to look like, and this is what this area is going to look like, with some of those regulation standards that were set. And so I call this, and I've seen this at least in my career as city manager, it's economic development versus community development. And it's vision versus having business come into your community. Ideally, you set the vision, you put it out there, developer walks in, looks at that, says this is great, we're going to put a building in, it's going to match everything you want, and we're off and running. That's an ideal case, and that happens. We've seen that happen with Horrocks Engineers and with that building and the Synergy building, and some of those buildings down there, they were presented the design standards, they built to it. Other times we have developers that look at those and say, you know, this isn't really what I want to build. Here's normally what a building I build looks like, and this is what I want to do. And it might not be consistent with the design standards. And so now we have a little bit of a dilemma as a city to say, okay, do we want to step away from the design standards a little bit to accommodate this development, or are we going to hold to the design standards and tell the developer either you do this or you're never going to get approval? And so that kind of puts us in a tough spot. And so really development can be slowed. If we have a certain vision, for instance, we decided a few years ago in the interchange area, so between I-15 and North County Boulevard, where the hotel was negotiated to come there, and it's where the Synergy building is. It's where St. John's Development has purchased property and looking at developing. When we look at that interchange area, and if we start holding to the vision or whatever the design standards were at the time, then again, it could slow the development out there. It could, for instance, we zoned out fast food in that area. We zoned out convenience stores. Because the city council saying, look, we want development out there, but we don't want it to become like an interchange you see at other places where it's just all fast food and convenience stores for people that need a break on I-15 as they're driving through. And so the hotel was going to kind of set the standard, and it made sense, I think, at that time that a particular vision was set. And so we've done that, and because of that, there's certain things that could be developed there today that aren't there. But if we've been approached by fast food, we've been approached by convenience stores to locate in the interchange area, and we have told them you do not meet the zoning in order to do that. So just, I want to go over a little bit what we control as a city and what we don't control. So when it comes to economic development, our tool box is we control zoning, we control the uses. And then we can also control the design standards. So we can say this is how we want this to look. You look at Park City and other cities, they create a design standard, and every development has to meet that standard, and they have that particular design standard that is obvious when you drive through town. The buildings look similar in nature, and generally there's a higher design that is probably normally required for cities when it comes to general development. What we don't control is who owns the land. We don't control when somebody purchases the land, how they're going to develop it in a way. We don't get to control particular brands. So if we zone something for restaurants, we don't get to say, okay, we're okay with Olive Garden, but not Little Caesar's Pizza. So we don't have that authority as a city to say that.
Let's back up.
How do we change that?
Can we zone for sit-down restaurants?
I actually don't know a lot.
Yeah, so we can, because we've zoned out fast food. So, but, you know, if we just have restaurants as our as the zoning, then we don't get to control the actual brands. Now, sometimes we do have a little say. If we're participating in an incentive deal, we absolutely have a say in what can go in there and out there, because now we're a financial partner in the project. if we don't have an incentive being provided to the developer, then if they meet the zoning code, then they get that use. And if it's our seventh grocery store, then it's our seventh grocery store. You know, so that's we do have some ways to handle that, and some ways we don't. When the vision was set back in 2007, the vision is really as good as the people that are sitting in the room at the time. So I don't think that vision is necessarily the vision of the people now sitting in the room to say, you know, that's what we want. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We haven't really had that discussion as a city. And maybe that's our next step, is taking a look at what the design standards are, the design districts, and have this discussion of, is this our current vision? Is this something we still want to uphold, or do we want to do it a little differently? The city council has the ability to change the code, and so if that vision that's out there is not what you're looking for, and it could be a tweak, it could be a few tweaks, it could be a total overhaul. I mean, there's different options, or it could be. Or it could be, we're happy with what the vision is, and let's just keep rolling with the vision. So when the code is set, then it's staff's job to interpret that code to a certain degree. For instance, developer comes in and they say, here's my project. Then our staff looks at it, they look at the code, and they determine, okay, are they meeting the design standards, amongst other things. You know, we have engineering and all these things going on. But one thing is the design standards. So it's, again, it's staff. Usually when it comes to this is Ken Young that is the one that has to sit down and say, okay, they're meeting the code or they're not. Now, we have the intent of the code, we have the letter of the law of the code. For instance, some of our language is very specific, and it calls out, you can have masonry, you can have concrete, you know, as far as the materials used to build your building, but in the interchange, I think it gives 3 or 4 different things you can use. So if you can't, outside of those 4 things, like in the interchange right now, brick is not allowed. You cannot build a brick building in the interchange. That was a decision that was made back in 2007. So that's pretty specific. That's telling the developer here, if you're going to develop in our community, you got four things you can build your building with. Because you're looking for a specific look. Now, when this was set up, we attached pictures that showed a lot of glass. It showed you know, a lot of curvature. So we have the specifics, and then we have the stuff that is a little bit more broad, and it was probably broad by design. And curvature might be one of those that we talk about. And what does that mean? Because all it says is that in the intent of this is that we want curvature as one of the design features. So a developer might sit down and say, this is meeting curvature, and staff might be saying, this isn't meeting curvature. And ultimately, I think the city council is the one that gets to define whether that's meeting curvature or not. And so there might be certain projects that get in front of you where staff might see it one way, developer might see it one way, and ultimately somebody has to decide, and that's the authority of the city council to make that decision. So like I said, right now we currently have pictures in there that show, hey, this is what we want this to look like. And again, it just comes back to this idea, if we want that vision to happen and developers are coming in and saying, you're not going to get this, this just isn't going to happen, there's not a market for this, or you know, this is just way too extravagant for your area and what's happening. And we could say, well, you know, that's fine, we think we can get it. We might have to wait 10 years, 5 years, 15 years, I don't know. It's an exercise of patience for us at that point. It's just saying, okay, either we're going to uphold the vision or we're not. Right now, one of the tools that the city council has is to actually waive the design standards, and we've done that a couple times. There's a, I can't remember what district where the doTERRA building ended up, but what they proposed did not meet the design district standards. And what doTERRA did is they said, well, we don't meet your design standards, but here's what our building looks like. And if you think you're okay with this, then we would like to apply for the waiver and put it into this standard. And that's what the city council did. They looked at that and said, okay, we understand that it's not the like look. If you think about just kitty corner, you have my oil business and the utility, the Utah Fertility Clinic. There's a particular design to those two buildings, and they look similar. doTERRA was supposed to look like that building. The city council said, we're gonna waive the standards for this because we see what you're building and it's a quality design, and we're okay with that. We did the same thing with the Aroma Tools building. They're on PG Boulevard. They don't meet the design standards, the design district that was met, but again, once the city council looked at that, they were okay. So we waived a couple. We have some, and I've already mentioned that follow the code, Horrocks, University of Phoenix, Synergy, the new Neuron building that's being built, they meet the design standards. And so the waiver is just a tool that the city council has. We can say, we're leaving all the design standards in effect. And if a developer comes and says, I want to do something outside of that, the city council can say, okay, show us what you want to do. And then city council can choose to waive the standards or not. If you're not happy with what they're showing you, you can say, you're not meeting the code and this isn't getting us where we need to go, so we're gonna deny the waiver. And either you need to meet the standard or you need to bring back a project that looks a little better. We have a couple projects that we're currently working on. We have the St. John's Properties project, and they've been working to meet the design standards. Having talked with Daniel last week, I told him we were going to be having this discussion, invited him to come and listen if he wanted to, and he said,
He's here.
"Hey, how you doing?" Well, so I'm gonna talk about what our phone call was, and then if I get this wrong, he can be here to correct me. But in essence, Daniel said, we can meet code. We're gonna meet code. Okay, so there's still a couple things that, and I know him and Ken are working on whether they meet code. So that's gonna become the issue eventually, is if staff is saying they're not quite there and developer is saying we think we're there, then we get both of them in front of you and we kind of talk about each side of it, and then the city council can say, okay, we think they meet the design standards or not. So that's one way of doing it. Once we have the Void project, the virtual reality, they have submitted a site plan. Right now, the design of their building does not meet the design standards of that area. They will be seeking a waiver to the design standards. So as Ken and I are talking, it's like, I mean, if we're just gonna waive everything, why do we have these design standards in the first place? So again, that's kind of a philosophical discussion that we can have as a city, if that's how we wanna proceed. So I think moving forward, we'll want to have a discussion on what the vision is, what the council feels that they want to see as far as the look out there. And then if there's a way that we can take that vision and put it into wording for code that is that works for us as a city, but hopefully for the development community. And I think with some projects we've run into a little bit of an understanding as to what this means. And for those people that sat in on the meeting in 2007, they can say, well, here was the intent. Well, maybe the actual code does not encapsulate what the intent was at the time. So we kind of want to take some of the guesswork or some of the interpretation out of it. But in some ways, maybe we can't fully do that. If we get rid of the design standards, we still want to have a quality looking development. I think most people that develop have the same interest, and some don't. And so how do we make sure that the design and what the building looks like is acceptable to us as a city? So again, that's probably another thing that we need to talk about. So that's just me talking about through some of the points. So if there's any questions or how we want to proceed, again, I think in our retreat we could probably have part 2 of this discussion and start deciding if we want to jump further into what the current vision is out there.
One quick question I have, Scott. You talked about the council's role in this procedure. Could you talk briefly about the role of the planning commission and the role of the design and review board? Does the planning commission have a part in telling us whether something meets code, and design and review board, do they give an approval and say, yes, in our view, this meets, or what is their role? Explain how they fit into the process.
So I'll, and Ken, if you need to help me out, but the design review board is to sit down and go over specifically those design standards. And they are a recommending body. So staff is gonna be there, staff's gonna present their side of kind of where they're at. The design review board will look at that and say, okay, they're getting us where we need to go, or they're not. That gets sent up to the planning commission, and the planning commission, again, is advisory in nature. So they do have an ability to take a look at that and in their interpretation, figure out whether code is being met or not. And they're making a recommendation. So when it comes to a development, you could have a planning commission recommendation, you could have a staff recommendation that's different than the planning commission recommendation. And then, you have the final decision made by the city council. The developer gets an opportunity as the applicant to share kind of, again, their interpretation of the code and how they read it. And so then we have the discussion, and hopefully, when we do those things, we don't do this a lot. We've had a few that we've done. I mean, for the most part, either it's pretty clear cut in our minds that they've met code and we're on our way, planning commission agrees and we're on our way. I will take the St. John's development as an example where the design review board and the planning commission both gave a positive recommendation on as far as the design standards. Staff felt differently about that. They felt like the standards weren't being met. And which came to a head when the site plan got in front of you guys, and then the city council kind of has to decide, okay, are they meeting the intent or are they not? And then the city council decides, and if it's yes, we get a project built. If it's no, then the developer has to go back and figure out a way to hear what the council has to say to meet the needs of the council in order to do that. Now, hopefully within code. I mean, the code is what it is, and it's straightforward, and it's our laws, and it's what we govern ourselves by. But sometimes the interpretation of this code gets a little different for different people.
So does maybe the design review board and planning commission, maybe on the Grove, on the different districts out there, do they feel maybe, what's the use, because it's just gotta go to city council anyway? I mean, I've heard a little bit about that, so.
Well, I guess in my opinion, it's just part of the process, and it's not the first time a planning commission and city council disagreed. And yes, when that happens, sometimes the planning commission's saying, what's our role here? Well, their role is to recommend, and it does not mandate the council to say yes to what they recommend. And so really, you're elected, the planning commission's appointed. You guys are accountable to the public, they're not. And so, and it's pretty clear that this is you're the ones that can give approval on this, the planning commission can.
Question then, we'll take Daniel back there for existence. When he comes and says, hey, does it say no bricks in there, or does it leave it open for?
Yeah, so particular to that, like if we look at the interchange and we say, and right now, it does not call out brick as something that's acceptable to be used as a facade for a building. So I think generally speaking, most of the buildings, they do have a brick element in it. They can get around the brick element. There's a way that they can develop this, and if you ask Daniel, it's, this really is an inferior product, but if your code says it's got to be concrete, and it's going to be a concrete looking brick thing, or the city council can say, well, maybe we'd rather have brick than a concrete looking brick thing, and you can grant the waiver and say, okay, let's give them brick so that they can do that. So there's a way for a city council to do that. Now, again, that's through a waiver process, and that's where the discussion is had, is to say, okay, any developer comes in and shows us a development that staff might say, hey, this isn't meeting code. Council might agree with that, but if the council looks at that overall development and says, this still looks good, might not meet the exact design standards on everything, but we like the look, then you just grant the waiver and they're on their way, they can go. But this idea now that we have design districts where we're trying to look for a similar look in some ways is, Garden Grove, is that the housing development? I think we gave them a waiver too, didn't we, on their development, on the housing development?
No, I don't believe so.
Which one's the,
Strawberry Point. Strawberry Point.
which is the one that was the Robinson Bean property?
Yeah, that was Garden Grove.
Was that Garden Grove?
But they didn't get a waiver.
Okay.
They designed to do a different district, and then we found out they were in they thought they were in Mountain, but they were in Garden or something.
No, maybe that was the case. I remember we had a
And
discussion
they
on
found out
it.
they were in the.
And they changed back to
Right.
dark.
So personally, I think it'd be a great discussion for the retreat and maybe go over it and talk about if there's any tweaks in that, so.
So, we can provide the current code and vision. And I mean, we'll give you the actual verbatim code that you can all read through.
Do we have enough time?
Well, we'll give Ken, we'll have Ken summarize some of it for you to say, particularly if there's certain things that have been sticking points with developments, I think we want to have that discussion. Again, if we're okay with the vision, then we can use this waiver as a tool to say, all right, they're not getting there according to how we interpret the code, but we're okay with the development, so let's just grant the waiver. And
Maybe King gets 3 minutes per district.
One quick thought on process as we're having this discussion. It seems like really if there's a difference of opinion between a developer and the city staff as to whether code is met, and then there's a question of, well, if it's not met, maybe a waiver is appropriate. It seems like that's really two agenda items, that's two different discussions. We've got to make a judicial determination whether some kind of interpretative decision, yes, this does in fact meet code, or no, it does not, in our views, as the five of us. And then a second question perhaps.
On the waiver?
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
that's
we've
right.
decided that it doesn't meet code, then do we want to grant a waiver? And I don't know if that's cleaner or more transparent for the public or somehow more helpful, but in my mind, what's happening is a two-tiered process of figuring out where do we stand on whether or not this meets the code, and then where do we stand on whether or not we want to allow it despite it not meeting the code.
I think that's right, because if the developer approaches you and says, here's my interpretation, and the council agrees with it, they don't need the waiver.
Right.
Then we just approve the development, and they're meeting our design standards and they're building. If the city council's looking at it saying, they're not getting there, they're not meeting it, then the city council has the decision to say, they're not meeting it, but we're okay with what they're presenting, so let's grant the waiver. So it's not a one-step process, you're right, there's two steps in there.
So today, are we looking for?
Well, so, yeah, the recommendation on my end, let's get the code in front of you and talk about the vision. And if the vision, we'll cross this bridge when we get to it, but if the vision is pretty close to what current council says, yeah, this is pretty good, maybe there might be a tweak or two which require us to send it back through planning commission and change the ordinance. Or if it's close enough and saying, okay, we're gonna stay with this, because there might be some pending projects that are driving this issue slightly, but we want this to be global, we want it to be long-lasting, so I think we have the discussion with the idea in mind that there's gonna be numerous projects that are gonna be asking, like I said, the void site plans come in, we know they're not gonna meet design standards. So that's just gonna be a straight up, okay, city council, here's what it looks like, are you okay with this, because we're gonna ask for the waiver. So let's start with the vision, and then if the vision does need to be changed radically, then we're probably having more meetings to figure out what that vision is. If it doesn't need to be changed radically, then I think we can make a few tweaks or just kind of move forward.
Some background.
Yep.
At the time that a lot of these decisions were made, there was nothing out there. And I think like Ken has evolved some of the design guidelines for us, particularly around housing. I'm thinking that as development came along, he saw that eventually the need to have those guidelines sort of blended and it was filled in, so it could be modified. I think that in this case, what we're talking about is you've had development take place, and a lot of what the code was written on design-wise was based on presentations and visions of grandeur on what was presented by different developers back in the day.
Yeah.
I mean, some pretty extensive, very large projects that were taking up hundreds of acres. And so the question, I think, again, it goes back to, you have a different council now. You have some businesses that are already in place, and it's, what do you want that to be out there? What do you want that thing to look like going forward? And there's some real issue there about short-term versus long-term. Because if depending on how you change it, you can have growth, you can have it immediately.
Absolutely.
You may not be happy with what's there 10 years from now, 15, 20 years from now. Then again, on the other hand, if you put it out there that you're looking for something that has a very long-term, overall planned feel to it, you might be waiting a
Yeah.
while for that whole thing to be realized.
That's right, the more narrow that we have the standards, the longer we're gonna wait for development.
Right.
The more broad the standards are, then that can accommodate it. So we gotta find the line, I think, as a city to say, here's where the line is, or, just making sure, because we don't necessarily wanna make it a free-for-all and, hey, just, regular building code, no design standards, you can come in, the buildings can look any way they want, we can do that too, but,
So the other comment that I had written in that paper that I sent out to the council is, the more we monkey with something as a council or staff or body, whatever we do, the more difficult it becomes. I should say, the more we change something frequently, the more difficult it becomes for a person trying to make a decision on investing, whether or not to make that decision. Because you change the land use code underneath them, change the design guidelines underneath them, and pretty soon, what they had thought they could do this 5-year project on and make money at it is gone.
Yeah.
And we've seen those kinds of concerns come in front of us as well.
Well, we've done a little bit of that, absolutely.
If I could add, Mayor, as kind of a corollary thought to that, the more we have unclear language too, the more it lacks predictability for the developing community, and they can't look at it and say, or they come in and they invest a lot of money thinking that they have one understanding of what our code means. And so to the extent that our discussion today is just to kind of give our colleagues a sense of what our thinking is and give staff some direction as we prepare for a further discussion, I guess what I would say is, from my perspective, human history has shown us that there's no better way to achieve shared prosperity than through free markets and free enterprise and through unleashing the creative power of entrepreneurial thinkers in the community. And so I favor ideologically less restriction, less regulation. But I think there's a tremendous need for real zoning and design and review standards. But to the extent that we have examples in our code that are illustrative, but not actually binding or mandatory, if there's precatory ideas or things in there that are what we would like to see but aren't actually something we're going to insist upon, I'd like to see all that clearer. I'd like it to be, predictable for the development community.
I agree, and I think that's, it is finding this balance of trying not to dictate everything that the developer needs to do as far as certain materials on buildings, but also having something in there that says, here's a particular vision that we want. And again, in our design standards in the interchange, I think one of the things that says we're looking for a unique look. Well, I don't know how a developer looks at that and knows what we're thinking when it means a unique look. That's one of it's not spelled out specifically what unique means, but it is in the language there that the city council can look at that and say, well, that's not unique. Well, people's opinions of unique is very widely. So to get more specific, yes, in some cases, yes, in other cases, maybe not. And but I think starting to talk through that, we can figure some of that stuff out.
Agreed. Yeah, and so just broadly, my preference is to minimize the amount of words and terms and ideas that are broadly varied in their interpretation.
Yeah. Well, it makes it hard on staff too. I mean, they have to determine.
So if we could maybe at our level stop short of trying to dictate color of brick and leave that to professionals who understand how to take, the vision and make it specific for that purpose, I think that would be good.
Yes. Yeah, that's, hopefully I was alluding to that when we get really specific on what your building has to look like, down to this is the material you have to use, and we give 3 or 4 options, that really kind of limits the developer on what they can use on their building. So, but you know, again, if we have a design feature standard, then we have to find the balance. And there might be some things that, 2 or 3 things that we just prohibit instead of saying, here's what you can use. And just say, we know we don't want this. So but again, we're kind of dictating now as a city what they can put on their building.
Anything else, council? Okay, so we can expect this to come up as.
We'll see at the retreat as a discussion item, and we'll have in your retreat packet, we'll have some of the materials for you to, if you want to start reading through the code, you can now. Like I said, I think Ken will do a little bit of a summary that will have some specific talking points for us to discuss that are part of the code.
Okay.
That will be, that we'll take it from there.
The planner gets to show us how to plan.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is a discussion of the February 2nd city council meeting. I don't think we have a draft of that yet. Is
Yeah,
that
we
right?
don't, there's 3 items, excuse me, that we know that we have. We have 4,000 North Sewer. We'll have the numbers on that presented to you, and we'll need some feedback on that. We'll have those numbers to you hopefully by next week, so you have some time to review those before the meeting. We also have a road that's master planned that goes through Ray Proctor's farm, and Ray has requested that road be removed. He's, I think, scheduled, if we hit all of our noticing, we're okay. If we hit, we're scheduled for January 28th, Ray is, for the Planning Commission, and February 2nd for the City Council to do that. And just as a note, it will be a public hearing on the Planning Commission level, but not on the City Council level. I mean, ultimately, you'll decide whether that road stays or goes. Oh, okay. Tina's telling me we're still working on the public hearing part in front of the City Council. And then we'll be discussing the accessory apartments ordinance based on our discussion last week. We'll have a fresh copy of that for you to
So that'll be at the February 1st meeting?
February 2nd, yeah. Yep. So those are the 3 items we have right now.
Okay.
And a reminder, no meeting next week.
No meeting next week. Can't emphasize that one enough. Okay, we're gonna go ahead to neighborhood and staff business. Libby? Okay. For other neighborhoods? Okay. And if we can get that information to Scott as well, so it can go with the other online methods that we talked about tonight. Anything else, Libby? Okay, thanks. John, did you have anything?
I thought Libby had some more stuff regarding the comments made with the lack of interest in the neighborhood committee meeting.
What are you priming here, John?
John, did you have anything specific?
Well, there were some of the neighborhood committee members who said, boy, this meeting must not be important to the city.
Oh.
So Libby will hit it from
was
there.
missed. But Royce was not feeling well, and Carl probably was.
So some of our staff were not able to attend today? Okay. Yes?
When my planner, who is assigned to go to this meeting, because it's very challenging for me to do so when they meet right before city council, and I'm always scrambling to get ready, our planner was sick. So,
He did email me
yeah, she knew he was sick.
items, and that came up.
So that's an unfortunate reality,
Yeah.
but I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah, no, I said that, he was ill.
And I look forward to being at all of them that I can make it to, even if we're stuck in traffic coming back from Salt Lake County, but I'm excited to be able to serve on that committee. It is important to the city, and it's a great way to get information out.
We'll have Royce bring a note from his doctor next time.
So he emailed me an email
items that he would have brought up, so. we had
John, did you have anything else you want to bring up? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John.
We'll go over here then. Ken?
I have nothing.
Nothing? Don't tell me. I'm just really messing up tonight. David? Anything?
It is January, so expect an email from me soon with instructions about the Team Member of the Year award and the nomination process for that.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Anything else? Okay,
And that
thanks.
can be a council member or?
You're a team player, but you're not eligible for the award.
No.
I just have to ask every year just to see if the rules have changed.
Nothing's changed. Anything else, David?
Nope.
Dion?
Marty said he needed my time, so.
Okay. Marty?
I have one item. We have the city games coming up next Wednesday at 10 a.m. We're going to do our basketball 3-on-3 contest and hot shot contest. So invite all those of the city council as well and the members of the, I guess, employees of the city to come and play in those games and see if they can be public works this year.
Next Wednesday at 10. If I remember correctly, we won last year. Me and Diana and who else was on our team? Scott.
I didn't have anything to do with it. It was
Yeah,
all
you
you.
did.
No, it was
Well,
But I think Marty just threw it down.
yeah, you did. Same teams.
Okay.
I
Anything
think
else, Marty?
David was on our team too.
No? Okay. Dave?
No, nothing, but thanks for your participation last Friday.
It's a good party. We enjoyed it. Mike?
Good things Utah will be doing a spotlight on our Youth Citizens Academy tomorrow morning, if anybody's interested.
Oh, wait, good things, okay.
And then you're also having your kickoff this Friday, is that right?
Next Friday.
Pardon?
Not this
The
Friday.
next Friday.
Next Friday, okay.
29.
Great. Anything else? Sherry?
We have been doing food for fines. It's done now, but we have 3 overflowing drums in the library. We look like the food pantry ourselves.
Good.
So that's exciting to see. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Scott?
Nothing.
Nothing? Tina?
Nothing?
Dagan? No. Kathy? All right, Diana?
Yes, a couple of things. First of all, Andrew Ingeman was the fireman of the year, and I thought maybe we should mention that. I also want to, very similar to Donna Jolly, very emotional last couple of days about fire and police, public safety. And I've actually been very intrigued by the fact that we've lost a fireman and a policeman to other cities. And I've just been very aware that, first of all, unemployment in Utah is the lowest in the nation. We're at 3%. We're not competing. Our citywide, all of our employees have access to go to other businesses we're not competing for employees city to city. We're actually competing with the private sector now. And we have in the past year, I think, lost a couple of policemen to different industries. And at some point, I think we're going to have a conversation about the level of service that we want. What is the standard? Do we want to train and send them away? Do we want to compete in the marketplace for skill, quality? I love the fact that our employees, especially in public safety, and I'm feeling public safety right now because of what has happened. Anyway, it's weighing very, very heavily on on me. An unskilled guy can make more at Fugle than a skilled guy that's fighting every day to protect my family. So,
That's something we can look at the retreat.
Yeah, I think we should start that discussion at the retreat.
We will.
Level of service, I
Yep.
think, is a good way to approach that.
Once we get into budget, we'll have similar discussions. It's not just police and fire, it's citywide.
Yeah, one of mine is interviewing the day after.
Yep.
Right.
Part of the deal.
So this is now a 3-day retreat?
Yeah, 4-day if we want. Just bring our sleeping bags. And
There we go. Lynn?
No, I think we're good there.
Okay, thank you. Sid? Eric?
I'm gonna echo what Diana said, the level of service, we need to look at all our employees and see. Cause I'm tired of seeing us train and release, if you wanna call that a term, but, yeah. So yeah, maybe a 3-day retreat.
There you go.
Or 4 day, whatever.
Anything else?
That's it, sorry.
Okay, Ben?
I could bring this up when we talk about calendar, but I wanted to mention that today, my understanding is that the county leadership had a state of the county kind of meeting presentation with county commissioners. And one of them, Bill Lee, is from Pleasant Grove. He's actually going to be speaking to the Pleasant Grove Rotary Club in 2 days on Thursday, whatever that would be, Thursday the 21st, is that? And so, anyway, for those that missed the state of the county, because you were working or whatever unholy time they hold those meetings, there may be a chance right here in Pleasant Grove, Toby's Restaurant, to listen to Commissioner Lee. It'd be a great, well-spent hour, probably.
Thank you. Okay, we've signed the plats.
I have one more question.
Sorry.
So is there an agenda building for the retreat? or-
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, we talked about it as staff last week and started putting it into place. If you, I could have a draft out by the end of this week, and then if you wanna add things or whatever. Now, some council members have sent me stuff, so in the agenda, I'll list their item and their name next to it as, cause some I think will, if they have an idea, then they can present the idea. Other than that, a lot of it's staff driven and things that, most of it's not gonna be a surprise, you're gonna recognize all the items on there.
Anything else? Okay. I didn't see anything on the calendar.
No council meeting next week.
No council meeting next week.
That throws off my whole feng shui.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, make a motion to adjourn.
We can leave that.
Okay, we have a motion by Eric, and a second by Lynn. All in favor?
Aye.